My dear conferers, my name is Piotr Chyła. I am the director of the Spirituality Center here in Rome. And I know you are there in Kenya. And using these modern tools, we can see each other, even though what I can see right now, it is only the eye of the camera and Father Biju behind it. So first of all, I send you my best greetings here from Rome, where it is extremely hot. And if you see any sweat on my face, it is not because I'm nervous, but it is quite hot here, even though we use here air conditioning. I send you my best greetings, and in a special way, I would like to greet Father General Michael Braille, who is supposed to be with you, his vicar, Father Alberto S. Severi, and brand new executive director of the Secretariat for Formation, Father Manny Rodriguez. He will be with you, and I believe this is his first course for formators that he is conducting and leading. The theme of our conference, video conference, is the elements of the Alphonsian spirituality. We are Redemptorists, and we know that we were founded by a great man whose name was Alphonsus Maria de Liguori. But we know that along the history of our congregation, we have been blessed with so many saints, blessed, and martyrs. If we count them all together, we will arrive at the number 19. And if we add to this group of people the Blessed Mary Crosta Rosa, we will arrive to the number of 20 people. In 300 years of our history, these people marked our congregation. So the question with which I would like to start this conference is very generic, but very important. Is there a Redemptorist spirituality? For sure you sense that with this question I would like to challenge you. Is there a Redemptorist spirituality? Or, we can say in other words, is the Alphonsian spirituality the only Redemptorist spirituality? If we look at all those 20 people that marked our history, saints, blessed, martyrs, we can understand that they lived in different environments, in different times. The spirituality of St. Alphonsus can be hardly compared with the one of the Hispanic martyrs or the one of the Ukrainian martyrs. The spirituality of St. Clement is very different of that of Peter Donders. The spirituality of the Blessed Gennaro Maria Sarnelli is very different of that of Francis Zeilos, and so on. So the question is very appropriate. Is there a Redemptorist spirituality? Is there a continuity between the spirituality of our founder and the spirituality that we developed along the history? I believe that there is a term which allows us to see all those inputs together, and the term is incarnation. Normally, when we speak to the people about Alphonsian spirituality, we refer to its four famous elements: the birth, passion, and death of Jesus, the Eucharist, and Our Lady. And this is very correct for using a concrete and popular way of speaking. It is also quite correct because these four elements give us the basic method of the Alphonsian pastoral ministry, which is addressed to the whole person, not merely the mind or the senses, but includes the heart and therefore the emotions and feelings. As you can see during my conference, I will try to be spontaneous, but from time to time I will use these notes. I hope you will not get bored. So let us continue the term of incarnation. However, we are not making a mistake if we sum up these above mentioned 4 elements in the word incarnation. By becoming a child, dying for us on the cross, remaining for us in the tabernacle, and giving us Mary as our mother, God has made himself tangible and changes the heart of mankind with proofs of love. Furthermore, this very term of incarnation is the way of reading history and how to see it acting as a kind of fermentation of the mystery of redemption, from which comes forth the cry of salvation. To be aware of this cry and to decipher this fermentation is part of the law of incarnation, and therefore of the Alphonsian and Redemptorist spirituality. There is a continuity between the spirituality of our founder and us today. There is a continuity between his spirituality and the spirituality of all those our conferers, saint and blessed. Yes, but we have to know how to read it, where to discover it, and how to apply it into our life today, to our Redemptorist ministry in the church today. Let me use a very important term that was, we can say, invented by the Pope John Paul II in his document about consecrated life, indeed entitled Vita Consacrata. There he uses a term, creative fidelity. These 2 words should help us to discover the continuity between the intention of our founder and our life today, between how Alphonsus discovers the intention for creating the new congregation in the church, and how we continue his mission in the church today in many continents, in different cultures, using different language. So, creative fidelity. We should be faithful. That's one wing. But we should be also creative. Creative fidelity means we have to strive to understand better, to read the intention of Alphonsus, to read our charism again, today. And this is the mandate that we have received from the last general chapter, to read it again and apply it into today's reality, into this modern world with its shadows and with its limitations. Finally, creative fidelity means to discern what's redemptorist in our ministry and what is not redemptorist. Saying that whatever we do is redemptorist seems to be a little bit exaggerated. And we struggle sometimes in different areas of our ministry with this definition, what it is redemptorist ministry, in which consists redemptorist charism in the church today. In my conference, I would like to propose 3 points that can serve as a bridge between Alphonsus' idea of the congregation, between the way he managed to read the charism of the congregation in the light of the Holy Spirit, and us today, people of the 21st century. So the 3 points are still valid, and I hope it will remain valid forever. Without these 3 points, we cannot define our ministry as redemptorist. The first one, the central role of Christ the Redeemer. The second point, the presence of the abandoned people in our ministry. And the third point, the centrality of conscience. These 3 points will help us to discern, to understand, and to read again our charism and apply the consequences of that reading into our reality in this world of ours. So, the first point, Christ the Redeemer. At the center of Alphonsian spirituality, just as it is at the center of his moral theology and pastoral ministry, stands Christ the Redeemer. The whole life of Alphonsus can be compared to his work desk, on which dominated the crucified Christ and the image of Our Lady of Good Counsel. I'm sure you can imagine a desk and Alphonsus working, watching at Jesus crucified, and beside the cross there is the image of Our Lady of Good Counsel. The mystery of Christ as love, the Annunciation of Mary, is the fount of everything he does, thinks, or says. In the minds of many, there is a familiar echo of the introduction to one of his most famous works, the practice of the love of Jesus Christ. Allow me a little quotation. Alphonsus writes, "The whole sanctity and perfection of a soul consists in the love of Jesus Christ, our God, our highest good, and our Savior." The end of quotation. However, we cannot forget that one of his last works is entitled "The Admirable Conduct of Divine Providence in Saving Mankind through Jesus Christ." It sums up the whole of history, where love is the motive that makes God act. The parish missions in the Alphonsian way of thinking had only one objective: to bring all the people to the feet of the crucifix. Tanoia, the first biographer of Alphonsus, whom you for sure know and heard about him, at least in your novitiate, refers to the common meditation with the people for half an hour on the passion of Jesus Christ before a picture of the crucifix, covered with wounds and blood. For Alphonsus, the crucifix is a book in which we can learn the science of the saints, which is the science of the love of God. Another quotation. "Oh, what a great thought to be considered during all our life and for all eternity. A God dead for love of us. A God dead for love of us. What a great thought," Alphonsus writes. Perhaps we can take for granted the central role that Christ, the Redeemer, occupies in the message of Alphonsus. Somebody could say it is obvious. Who else than Jesus? However, it is worthwhile stressing it again, because even in our time, it causes new incarnations and new developments, particularly if we recall his two approaches to the mystery of Christ. Alphonsus sees Christ in two dimensions. The first one, Christ is the Savior of all, especially of those without hope of salvation. For Alphonsus, every human being is a candidate for salvation. He avoids every kind of exclusivism in the church. He does not apply the writing we see in some doors in today's world, members only. The church is open for everybody. And Jesus is the Savior of all. This is the first dimension. And the second one, all the labor of Christ aims at sanctification. In Latin, sanctificatio. But not that of justice, but that of love. Love is above justice. Justice is needed. Alphonsus, as advocate, he knew it very well. But he understood that love has a greater value. Again, when he speaks of uniformity with the will of God, Alphonsus sees it as an expression of love, not as an obligation, as justice, as a task to be completed, but as the will of God. And he understands the will of God in a very important way. He writes about it in his famous book. Allow me the quotation. All our perfection consists in loving our most loving God. And then our perfection in the love of God consists in uniting our will to His most holy will. If therefore, he writes, we wish to please entirely the heart of God, let us ensure that we conform ourselves fully with what God disposes. Conformity requires that we unite our will with the will of God. But uniformity, and this is the term Alphonsus uses, but uniformity aims at something more. And it is this, that our will and the divine will become one. So that we do not wish anything other than what God wishes. And so the will of God becomes ours. However, the will of God for Alphonsus and for the Redemptorist community is the Redeemer as love. It is not a law. It is not a norm. It is not a definition written on the desk and then applied to life. For Alphonsus, the biggest will of God, it is the presence of the Redeemer and His love for us, especially for the abandoned and for the poor. All this is summed up and has all its worth in continuing the work of the Redeemer, loving Him with the whole heart and working as He did. Quite often, we might be tempted to do our own will, our own tasks. We might be tempted even to believe that we have achieved something in life. Our mission in the church as Redemptorists is to continue the work of the Redeemer. He is still at work. He uses us, our hands, our heads, our abilities for His mission in the church. Here we finish the first point, the central role of the Christ, the Redeemer. And the second one, the people especially the most abandoned ones. For many, many years, during different general chapters, provincial chapters, perhaps in our private debates, we were trying to understand who are the poor and who are the abandoned ones. And I believe that we still have difficulty to understand it. We are still tempted to separate these two worlds and still struggling to have a clear idea of who are abandoned people. It is crucial that we understand who are the abandoned people, because Alphonsus embraces this category of the people at the origin of our congregation. He leaves Naples, he leaves the capital city, and he goes to the villages in the mountains. But let me remind you, in those times, the majority of the people lived outside of the city of Naples. So when he makes this kind of decision and choice, he makes it for the majority of the population, not only for those who were privileged to live in the city of Naples. But this is not that important. It is more important that we really understand who are poor and who are abandoned, and how to make this, how to distinct between one category and the other. In front of me is sitting Father Biju. So let us imagine that in his own country, in India, in Kerala, there is a family. Mother, father, and 5 children. They live a very poor life. They are good Christians. Kerala, it is the most Christian part of India. But what happens? The father dies suddenly. The family is deprived of the only source of income and finds difficulty to maintain the life of the family. But very close, only 200 meters from their house, there is a church. They can go to the church. They will receive some help. They will receive instruction. They will receive consolation. They will be directed how to manage, how to live, how to face this difficult moment of life. They can count on the help of other Christians. And hopefully, with the time, they will survive and they will manage to continue their life. How would you define these people? Are they poor or abandoned? I would say they are poor. They are not abandoned. There is no money in the house, but there is a church aside. There is spiritual support. Now, in the same country, in the same area of India, in Kerala, there is a family. Mother, father, and only 2 children, living high in the mountains, far away from the city centers, far away from any communication, far away from different villages. And these people, they live a poor life because they work in the fields. But they manage to sustain their life. Their life is not very rich, but they can survive living in a very poor style of living. But the only problem is that they are Christians. And the priest comes to that village, to that place only 3 times a year. How would you define this category of people? Poor or abandoned? I would say they are abandoned, forgotten. They can only receive spiritual help and support a couple of times a year. So, Alphonsus invites us to search for this category of people. We use the term abandoned. To clarify it, we can use the term, I think it is very appropriate, forgotten, deprived, people that are not taken into consideration. They are far away and nobody thinks about them. Even the priest, he goes there only 2 or 3 times a year. So Alphonsus says, we are destined to go to this category of people and give them their rights to receive the gospel, Christian instruction, and be with them in their life. How we do this? We go to them, not only to preach and not only to say how they should live their life, but we go to them and first we incarnate our presence in their midst as Redemptorist community. And this is our first proclamation, the presence of the Redemptorist community in the midst of the abandoned people. This is our first sermon. This is our first preaching before we open our mouth. And then we look at their life with respect and we discover their needs. Then we try to help them, to instruct them, to help them to return to their dignity. Then we preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Then we fight for their rights and we stay with them for good and bad. We use a very simple language so they can understand us. The language they can understand easy and the message they can apply into their life also easy. And then that's not enough that we live there, that we preach to them. But we have to be able to discover that these poor people, abandoned, forgotten, they are a gift for us. We give them gospel, but at the same time, they lead us back to Jesus. They are the very sense of our existence in the church. So we help them, but also they evangelize us. I hope I was very clear with this explanation about the abandoned people. It is crucially important that we understand this. And the Pope Francis today invites us to go to the peripheries. We can say that this Pope has an Alphonsian way of thinking, peripheries. So people forgotten, far away from the parish centers, far away from the churches, those that nobody would think about them, those who are forgotten, those who can't nothing. We should be able to discern where in the range of our ministry are those people that are defined as abandoned, forgotten. It is so important that we address them, that we stay close to them, that we give them the gospel and the message of good news. It is also important that in our community projects we define our life in this perspective, the life of those who are sent to the abandoned, to the forgotten. Not only from time to time, like this happened in the time of Alphonsus. There were many missionaries, congregations. They were doing missions like this. They were living in the city centers and they were going to the abandoned people only from time to time. So they were living in a very, very good life and they were going to the small villages for 10, 20, 30, even 40 days. But then, after this, they were returning to their comfortable, secure, easy life. This is not the way we do missions. We go and we pitch our tent in their midst. We incarnate. This was the Alphonsus idea how we should approach the abandoned people, how we should work in their midst. Not only to be there from time to time, but our presence should be constant in their midst, in the middle of the diocese. Not to stay far away from them. Alphonsus never wanted to run from the people. Alphonsus never wanted us to be monastic. His idea of locating our houses in the middle of the diocese was very clear. Not to run away from the people, but being accessible in the middle of the diocese, so we can reach people, but also people can reach us for retreats, for instruction, for common prayer. And the third point, the central rule of the conscience. Alphonsus had a deep love for the person. He had a deep love for the person, and that love was coming from his love for the Redeemer. It is an attitude that sprang from the mystery of a Redeemer who through love poured out his own blood for the salvation of mankind. Alphonsus, he knew it very well, that life of the people can be tough, that in their life they can feel fragile, that they are exposed to different difficulties and dangers in life. As a result, he knew well all the misery, both human and spiritual, to which they were condemned. As he looked lovingly at the crucifix, he understood the immeasurable greatness of every human being, loved by God as a son of his only Son. This is the origin of the central place which respect for conscience occupies in the Redemptorist spirituality. Alphonsus was a rigorist by formation. As he celebrated the sacrament of penance in his first parish as a young priest, and as he was celebrating Eucharist at the beginning of his ministry, he was scrupulous in his use of the mercy of God, confined it to his judgment. However, his contact with poor and the abandoned, forgotten, wounded, we would say today, made him change gradually his manner of thinking while remaining within the system of judgment that regulated the moral theology of his time. St. Alphonsus continued to reason within the casuistic system, though his mind was not that of a casuist. He did not want to deprive conscience of its competence and its responsibility by proposing the prefabricated, ready moral truth of others, nor by authority. He strongly maintained that moral truth is the truth of conscience, of a prudent conscience. As Redemptorist, a Redemptorist spirituality which treasures such a heritage ought to ensure that every believer, especially the more humble and the weaker, should become responsible for his own human and Christian life and know the gospel and the teaching of the magisterium. That's obvious. However, they should know well that it is their conscience in dialogue with God which is the final reference for a more just and responsible choice. For us Redemptorists, it is very important that we approach people in this way, that we allow them to make their choices, that we teach them how to take their decisions, how to be responsible. I believe that this is our mission in the church today. I believe that if we have this deep respect for every human being, doesn't really matter if he or she is Christian or not, doesn't really matter where he or she come from different culture, different continent, which language those people speak. We should see in them first that they are our brothers. And in this way we go along with what the Pope Francis is proposing to the Church today. He says, you cannot sit in your secure world when your brothers and sisters have to struggle. You cannot sit in your well-organized, holy life when you know that there are people who are deprived of their rights. And what we do? We bring them the gospel. We return to our origins. We return to our definition. We want to follow Jesus Christ the Redeemer. We want to continue His work, and we know it well, that He works using our resources. I hope that this little and short conference will help you to understand the main points of our spirituality. We could develop this topic in many other directions. I believe you will do so during your formation course there in Kenya. And I hope that one day you can also come here to Italy and live 3 weeks spirituality course that will help you to understand better and deeper our Redemptorist life and spirituality. I wish you all the best for your days of the course. I wish you all the best for your ministry. Please give my regards to your communities. Thank you very much.